Hi all, hope all is well. Welcome back to another episode of Adventures in Droning. On today's episode, we have been tasked with spraying water weeds. So there's a multitude of different water weeds floating about in Queensland's waterways, and for today's video, I'm going to show you how we go about spraying these dams out so that we can clear the waterways up and free up the irrigators. Now, in the background of these shots here, you can actually see an old processing mill. So it was used for processing of sugarcane. It has currently shut down, so it's been operating for quite some time, and it's an absolutely impressive structure. Unfortunately, it's been left in a state of disrepair. The costs of maintaining it have overridden the cost of operating it, so it's outweighed it. No longer feasible to keep it going, so unfortunately they had to shut it down recently. I'd love to be able to get in there to do some more video footage. At one stage it actually generated its own power. So as you can see here, we've travelled to the waterways. There's a lot of bird life in the waterway, so it's definitely an obstacle that we have to keep clear of. We don't want to go hitting any birds or spraying any birds or anything like that, of course, so we're always cautious when we're operating to make sure that the birds have moved on before we spray. And normally approaching with the drone is enough to move them on. As you can see in these shots here, this is just some of the examples of the waterweed that we're dealing with. So the waterweed in this shot here, this is Salvinia. Now, Salvinia is actually an introduced species dating back to the 1850s Brisbane Botanical Gardens. From what I understand, it was introduced there as an ornamental plant to go on display for the public to see. And from there, it's actually spread all throughout southeast Queensland and possibly even further than that. As you can see, there's also water hyacinth in the water as well. Now, both these plants play absolute havoc on the foot valves of pumps, for example. This is just a quick shot of some macadamias. So we're actually working right next door to a macadamia farm, and there were macadamias laying around everywhere. It was an awesome opportunity to get some footage of it. Thought it was really interesting. They were actually doing a little bit of harvesting while we were there as well. That's a quick shot of the battery chargers, the water-cooled battery chargers, and this, of course, is the P100 Pro. So it's a drone produced by XAG, and it is an absolute workhorse. If you're looking for a drone that's going to get the job done, that's highly reliable, you can't go past the XAG P100 Pro drone. It is by far the best drone that I have had the privilege of operating. Now, the following footage that you're seeing here is some up-close images of the water hyacinth itself. I decided to pull a plant out just so you could get a closer look at it to see how it actually operates as a plant. It's like a float, so they form these massive dense mats, and they just infiltrate the smallest nooks and creeks and river bends, and they're notorious to get rid of. They're quite interesting though. People have seen these way out in the ocean in their yachts and stuff like that. They form these massive mats and float right out of the ocean during floods and stuff like that. And again, water hyacinth was actually introduced by the Brisbane Botanical Society in the 1850s as an ornamental plant. So in a way, the group that was responsible for releasing this into the wild is now the group that actually polices it and demands that farmers get rid of it off their properties. So these jobs, we're not doing them because the farmers taking it upon themselves to get rid of it. We're doing it because they're being enforced to do it. Now, this is not to say that there aren't farmers out there who are taking it upon themselves to take care of this situation. Obviously, Water Hyacinth and Salvinia, they're highly invasive species, and the spread of them actually needs to be stopped. So there's a lot of cooperation at the moment to try and eliminate these from the Queensland waterways. And now you go back 2-3 years ago, a lot of people were getting out in their boats. So they'd actually have all the chem mixed up in the boat itself, and they'd get out there with a backpack sprayer or a pump sprayer, and they'd actually apply all the sprays by hand from boat. So as you can imagine, that'd be highly tedious. It'd be a massive project, and now compared to then, we can get what they were getting done in possibly weeks were getting done in days, or even a day, as was the case with this dam here. So you can see from the images that the water hyacinth itself hadn't infected the entire dam. And the reason that is because we have been treating this dam for the last couple of years, obviously with a multitude of different drones, of course. And over time, we are winning the war. We're fighting back against it. And now we're dealing with smaller and smaller pockets, and doing longer intervals between treatments. So you can see the benefits of having the drone, such as the XAG P100 Pro, are immense. There's also a lot of people out there who are collecting it up and taking it up onto the land and letting it dry out on the land. So that is another way to treat this problem as well, and that's to net it, actually drag it all in on a net, drag it to the actual shoreline itself, and then pull the nets up out of the water and dry the hyacinth out on the ground. You can't actually take the hyacinth away either, because it's an invasive species. It's actually restricted in those regards. This is actually a macadamia harvester. So as the macadamias fall off on the ground, I've never seen one such as this. That's actually a tractor driving backwards. And obviously they drive it as if it's a slasher attachment, and then they use a sweep to actually pick all the nuts up off the ground. It sweeps them all up, puts them into a basket, and then the basket themselves can actually be lifted into a separate skip bin, where they're taken to wholesalers or processing sheds and actually processed further. You can see in this shot here, so this is just an example of one of those bins getting emptied into a larger skip bin. It was quite the process. I've never actually seen it done before. Thought it was a really good opportunity to film it and show to everyone what's involved in harvesting the macadamias. So here you can see some detailed shots of the P100 Pro itself. So the XAG P100 Pro doing what it does best. This is, they're all manual flights as well. I didn't automate any of these ones in this dam in particular. There were quite a few obstacles involved in actually completing this dam spray. You can see the trees on the shoreline and the power lines overhanging it as well. So there was a considerable amount of flight planning involved in actually setting this job up. It wasn't just a matter of going out there, putting the drone up and going for it. If you treat the droning business in such a fashion, you will not be droning for long. You'll end up losing your drone in the water, tangling it up in branches, or even worse, power lines, and it could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not just in drone repairs, but in compensation for losses, etc. You can see some of the black swans in these shots here as well. I just found it absolutely amazing. That's actually a brolga, so that's the Queensland bird, the bird that represents Queensland apparently. Now, almost every square inch of available land around this district that I'm working at the moment is being utilised for some purpose. So whether it's for running cattle on the land and using the grass as feed, or as you can see here for the macadamias, it's a highly productive area. And agriculture in this area is our most productive industry for this district. So obviously we produce quite a lot here, and there's massive quantities of money added to the economy every year due to processes such as these here. You can see there a shot of a jet passing over. No contrails today. They were actually dissolving up as the jet progressed through the sky, so thought that was a pretty cool shot. Another couple of shots of the black swans. I know a lot of people, you go back 100 years ago, they thought the black swan was a myth. In fact, black swan is a term used in Wall Street now as an event that's unforeseen. This here is a pepper tree actually, so those little red berries you see there, if you crush them open, you can actually find like a peppercorn inside of them. This here is some sort of a silk nest. I don't know what it was. I actually videotaped it purely so I could identify it later on. No idea what it is, still don't know what it is. It reminds me that I probably need to go back and have a look. So once we'd finished that big dam, we actually moved on to another one. So down the road, about 10 k's down the road, there was a smaller dam that was required to be sprayed as well. This dam was matted with the water hyacinth. So the problem here was a lot worse. And from these shots here, you can actually see that we have treated this in the past, so it's not the first time we've been out to this dam in particular. These shots here, you can see are rat holes. Basically, the rats are making burrows, so they're burrowing in, and you can see the macadamia nuts there. So basically, it's burrowed in up underneath the macadamia farm itself. I know, yeah, the rats infestations in macadamia farms are massive. It's a massive problem. In fact, we have been employed in the past, not myself, but my boss himself has been employed to go out and use a thermal camera to try and identify the nests of rats in macadamia trees. It's a real problem. Another shot of the P100 Pro. It's an awesome drone, highly recommend it. These are just some shots of some flowers, and that's so while setting up and mixing, we get a little bit of downtime to actually take in the landscape around us. Like I've said in previous videos, I like to take the time to have a good look. I'm not sure what type of flower that is, but yeah, it was certainly beautiful and deserved to be videotaped, I thought. As you can see here, this is me setting up the job itself. So what I was doing was I was actually going to, instead of manually operating this drone over this waterway, I was going to automate the process. So it was just a matter of actually activating the drone itself and putting it into mapping mode. So these XAG P100 Pro drones can be automated and can be turned into a mapping device itself. So instead of going out over the water and actually marking the positions of the boundaries of the map, you can actually use the drone itself to go out there and mark these boundaries. It's a brand new feature. It's been out for about a year now, I believe it is, and it's massively improved things. It's changed the way we do our jobs as well. So it is a significant change, and it is definitely well worth using. It's just a matter of fine-tuning the process. So mapping with a drone is a process in itself, and there are risks involved in doing it. So you do have to do your mission planning when actually setting up to do your mapping using the drone as well. And of course, it takes a little bit of time to actually go ahead and map using the P100 Pro. But it's well worth it. Once you've taken the time to go and do it, you can automate the rest of your flights. Now, automating the job allows you to actually get a lot more precision than what you could by doing it manually. It also allows you to actually shorten up the distances between your routes. That way you're getting a little bit of overlap as well, and you're ensuring that you're completing the treatment of the weed at hand. The last thing you want is patches of weed that may come back if it hasn't been treated correctly. The idea is it's a process of elimination. The deal is you go out to these jobs, and the goal is to try and absolutely wipe this weed out. So next time if you do come back, the treatment will be less than the previous one. That's the general idea of it anyway. The biggest thing with the Water Hyacinth and the Salvinia is that it hides up on the banks as well. So we often treat the banks so that you're getting all the weed from up underneath the grass and that as much as possible. What we're finding though is it's very hard to get all of the Salvinia or all of the hyacinth. A lot of times what you find is the wind moves these weeds around into pockets, and sometimes it will actually stack them. And by stacking these weeds on top of each other, effectively what you're doing is you're killing the top layer, which actually reveals the bottom layer underneath, and then you'll find patches of regrowth. Now, some of those patches you can actually see coming up through the brown of the hyacinth in these shots here, for example. What it is the previous treatment, there may have been wind gusts during the application, or it has stacked and we've killed off the top layer, which has resulted in the first layer dying off and sinking to the bottom of the dam. And inadvertently, it actually reveals the layer underneath and gives it an opportunity to thrive as well, which is why it's important to always do repeated applications of this chemical. So the chemical we're using here is a bioactive. It's designed to be put into waterways and stuff like that, so it's frog friendly. And one of the main objectives of having a bioactive chemical such as this product is so that it only kills the weed. That's the idea. Now, when you do kill large amounts of hyacinth, such as what you see in the photo here, if you're around communities like a township or a village or inside town somewhere or in a city, The treatment of water hyacinth in large quantities, it's recommended to do it in patches. So the idea is you do not want to sink a whole hectare, for example, of hyacinth at once. Now, the reason for not doing so is because decaying matter, so when you kill a whole heap of hyacinth, it'll actually degrade, it will sink. So its buoyancy, it loses its buoyancy, and it actually sinks to the bottom of the lake, and it can deoxidize the lake, which can result in fish kills, etc. So through a lot of trial and error, unfortunately quite a bit of error, these companies have come up with unique ways of applying treatments so that you're trying to benefit everything that lives in the environment as much as possible. So you can see in these shots here, basically the P100 Pro is going about its automated process, and it is quite a complex automation process as well. So by doing all the mapping that we've done previously, it's ensured us that we're staying away from the boundaries of the job, staying away from the trees along the shoreline, for example. It's also making sure that we're staying away from the power lines as well. So while doing the mapping process, I actually recorded the heights of the power lines to ensure that during automation operations, I wouldn't be flying equal height to the power lines or above the power lines. I wanted to make sure that the operation would occur below the power lines. That way, the drone was going to always return back, and we weren't going to potentially damage infrastructure or anything like that as well. You can see that log there in the middle of the lake as well. I actually marked an obstacle around that to ensure that I didn't go anywhere near it. And then once I was finished doing the operation automatically, I went back and I manually sprayed over the top of that obstacle to ensure that I got all the hyacinth around it as well. So ultimately what I'm trying to say is that operating a drone such as this in an automation process is not quite what it seems. Yes, the drone will fly automatically. Yes, it puts out a fantastic even rate of spray, a good decent blanket spray. So you get your precision in that as well. But it's not to say that you don't have to actually be the pilot while the drone is flying in automation. You are still the pilot. If you're employed to operate one of these drones, whether it is in manual mode or in automation, without doubt, you are the pilot. And in Queensland or in Australia, for example, you have to be piloted and licensed to actually operate these drones. There is currently a bit of a misconception about operators not technically being pilots because of the automation process that these drones can perform. But rest assured, and let me tell you from experience, that that's simply not the case. You are still definitely piloting this machine, whether you're going through the flight planning to make sure that the drone goes to the job correctly, whether you're placing in the guide points to get it out to the job, ensuring that you've done your checks and your safety checks to make sure that there's no obstacles or it's not going to fly into any trees or into a set of power lines, because ultimately it is the pilot who takes responsibility for the flight, whether that's because it's a successful flight and most importantly, when it's a failure. Someone has to bear responsibility for it. So unfortunately, that's all the time there is for today's video. If you got something out of this video, a bit of information perhaps about the P100 Pro, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Until next time, thanks again. Cheers. Bye.